One of the things that's really important to me when I begin using generative AI is I want to use it in a way that makes me think more about the problems I'm solving and not less. That enriches my understanding of what I'm doing rather than replaces my understanding. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to replace my brain. I don't want to use this exoskeleton for my mind to get things done and then have my mind atrophy. So what is a simple technique that we can use to make sure that we end up at a better product, not just something that we get done faster? Because so often we go into these tools and we try to generate that email and get there faster, and we don't actually end up with a better product. Like, that's really what we want to do at the end of the day, is we want to end up with a better solution, a deeper understanding of the concept. Have written a more thoughtful, empathetic email. That's what we really want to do. We don't want to just go and say generate it faster. And that's what so much of we see out there is like copy and paste this prompt and get it generated for you. Be done, be done. Don't even think about the prompt. And I don't know about you, but that's not where I want to go. I don't want my critical thinking and my creativity to atrophy because I'm just going and generating a bunch of stuff and not paying attention. So what is the simple thing that we can do to change everything? It is the most basic, easy prompt engineering technique ever, and it's to exploit generation. So what does this mean? Well, I want to give you just a quick, glimpse at what this looks like. So let's go in and let's do the quick and easy thing. Write an email for me announcing my new course on advanced prompt engineering on Coursera. So I go and I write this. How long does it take for it to generate the answer? Well, this isn't the answer. And that's the starting point, is we recognize that generative AI is not giving us the answer, it's giving us a perspective. And what does that mean? Well, it's going and generating this answer, but that answer may or may not be correct. And that's the problem, is we think of it as an answer rather than a perspective. And we can go and generate many different perspectives on the way to solve this problem. So if I go back and I just take this original prompt, I move to a new conversation and I run it again, I'm going to get a totally different email. And let's think about how fast that was done. It was done really, really fast. In fact, it's done so fast, there's almost no excuse for me not to exploit that generative capability and to go and explore multiple options. That is, the basic thing that we can do is we can use the fact that it can generate things so fast, not to generate one and try to be done, but to generate many, many different options for different kinds of things that we might want, and then to go and select from the universe of options that we use it to generate in order to arrive at a better answer. The goal is to go and look at many different options and to choose the best one. The goal is not to generate the fastest option. And in fact, this is a very small amount of extra time. If you look at how fast it took me to go from 1 to 2, I've probably already doubled the quality of what I can get out because I can look at 2 separate things. And on average, I'm probably going to be much better now. Or if I take them and I merge them together, or I start analyzing what I like about one or the other, and I start saying, well, I like that part of that one and this part of this one, maybe I can merge them together. And suddenly I've engaged my brain, because the moment we have more than one of something, it also forces us to think about, what do we like about one thing? Why would we choose one over the other? And the moment we have choice, we have to go and start thinking about why we're doing something, how we're going to select. It engages our aesthetics. Even if we don't actively think of why, we go and we look at them, and all of those parts of our brain that help us to decide what we like and don't like, to decide what's our voice or not our voice, all of these things kick in and we start thinking again. And this is the basic thing that we're going to go and explore, is all the ways that we can use this simple technique of exploiting the generative capability to get more than one of something, and get more than one of something very quickly, and then use that to be able to compare many different options and to start thinking about why we're going to select one option over the other. And that, if you want to talk about return on investment, this is the biggest return on investment we can get. It's not that we go and we generate an email faster and we get some incremental, like 11 minutes that people quote. I don't want 11 minutes. I want to do something that blows people's mind because it's so good. I can get 11 minutes other ways. I can write faster. I can do all kinds of things for 11 minutes. That's a useless metric. What I want to do is create something new, that something you hadn't thought of. I want to generate the best of something that nobody's ever seen. I don't care if I get there faster or not. I care about the quality of what I'm doing, and the way to get to the quality is to spend more time thinking about it. And that's what we're going to explore. How do we get to a better outcome, not a faster outcome, by exploiting generation? So let's go back to that ROI question. What is our return on investment of generative AI? Which industries are going to be affected? Well, I'm going to give you something that I think will help convince you that every industry is going to be affected, and that the ROI on generative AI can be tremendous with a very, very simple technique. Now I think of prompt engineering as about how do we solve problems and reinvent what we do with generative AI. I don't think about it just as how we go and arrange words and exploit little tricks in the patterns. Certainly the patterns are powerful, but the reasons the patterns are powerful is because they give us new ways of thinking about solving the problem. So let's jump into the idea of problem solving, where we are exploiting generation. So this is one of the fundamental, most important things that we can do with prompt engineering to really have an impact. And that is, we go and use it to help explore many different ways of solving a problem. So whenever we go into generative AI, or whenever we have a problem to solve, we need to simply remember the pattern that I can go and ask for options. Let's use the ask for options pattern. And the ask for options pattern is we never ask for one of something, we ask for more than one of something. Every single prompt where we need to produce something, we start by producing more than one of it. So in this example, I go and I say, give me 5 ways to solve any prompt that I give you, or give me 5 ways to solve any problem that I give you, and compare and contrast them. Ask me for the first problem. So I'm doing a little bit of flipped interaction here to get it to ask me for the problem to solve. It says, sure. And now I go and I say, I need to set up a registration system for a small webinar. I want to be able to send follow-up emails to everyone that used the form data they submitted to generate unique prompts for a large language model for the person based on their area and expertise. Now this was a little bit underspecified, and I realize now reading it back it's not the clearest thing, but here's the problem that I'm solving. Now I then go and insert this, and now I'm getting ideas generated of how I could solve the problem. Method 1, use Google Forms and Google Sheets. Okay, now I've got an option, I've got a series of steps, and then I've got the pros and cons. And this is important because when we start thinking about that we want to go and try to solve a problem, and we're going to generate multiple different, possible solutions, we also want to start thinking about how we're going to compare and contrast them, the pros and cons. And this is really where the kicking in of the thinking happens. When we start getting multiple options, we start thinking, but we also want to get different perspectives on what the pros and cons might be of different solutions, especially if there's solutions in there that we don't know. So what we're asking for is give us multiple solutions, but also compare and contrast them. And now we're seeing method 1, Google Forms and Google Sheets. Method 2, use an event management system like Eventbrite. And then we've got pros and cons. Method 3, using a custom web application. Pros and cons. Cons requires development skills or hiring a developer. Method 4, using a CRM system like HubSpot. Method 5, using a no-code platform like Airtable and Zapier. That's actually really interesting to me. That might be one that I might want to go and try and do something really custom and unique. But I wouldn't necessarily have thought of that if I just jumped into the problem. And this is where the real ROI, the simplest ROI you can get to in generative AI, is to start using it to support your decision making by simply going out and seeking multiple perspectives on how to solve a problem. Now, let's think about that. If you go and arrive at a fundamentally different approach to a problem that solves it better, what is the value to that? Well, it's a function of the importance of the problem, it's not some 11 minutes thing. It's about how well how important that problem was and the difference in the solution that you arrived at because of it. Now, is this easy to measure? Does this fit into this standard types of things that we go and assess? No, it's really hard to measure, but it's something simple where you can have tremendous impact on what you do, and the impact could be transformative. Because if you apply it to the right decisions and you arrive at a much better decision, or if at the very least you help guard yourself against not having explored a particular option, that's tremendous return on investment. That is the simplest thing that you can do, is start looking at how do we solve a problem different ways. Let's take another example. So I'm camping with my family in the woods. We have tinfoil, a skillet, and no other cooking tools other than fire. Give me 3 ways to bake a cake and compare and contrast the difficulty of getting the cake to turn out. Assume I have a store-bought cake mix. So I'm telling it the problem, I'm giving it assumptions, and I'm telling it how many solutions that I want. It comes back, tinfoil oven. Prepare the cake batter according to the store-bought instructions. Take a large piece of tinfoil, create a dome-like structure, ensuring it's tall enough to cover the cake. Pour the batter into a foil-lined skillet. It goes on and on. Now I want you to take just 1 second to just fully appreciate the insanity of this. Like, if I had like 100 PhDs, all the supercomputing power in the world, and you asked me to build a system 2 years ago that I could take an arbitrary problem and it would give me a potential solution to it with steps and difficulty, forget it, not possible. I cannot do this as a computer science professor. In fact, no tech company can, maybe outside of OpenAI or Anthropic or one of these companies that was building these models, but I'm not even sure they were there yet. And now you have access to this right here anytime. I do not know why you would not tap into this to at least get perspectives on how to solve the problem. You don't have to accept its solution. And in fact, you're going to look at all these solutions and you're going to carefully vet them, but it's going to open your mind to possibilities. And that is huge. What is the next possibility it gives us? Skillet baking. Prepare the cake batter, grease the skillet, pour the batter into the skillet, cover the skillet with a tight-fitting piece of tinfoil, place it on the hot coals, goes through it. Method 3, Dutch oven substitute. Describes how to do this with tinfoil. And we've got all these different options, and then it comes back and it gives us a comparison. Heat control, outcome, ease of use. And this is super valuable information, because now I'm thinking through what are the different ways I'm doing it, but I'm also getting a framework now to start thinking about how do I compare and contrast these. I'm learning in the process because I already am seeing issues surfaced that I need to be aware of, like heat control. If I put this in a skillet and I put it on coals, I might burn the bottom of it, I might have difficulty, and it's pointing that out. Method 2, high, requires constant monitoring and adjustment for heat control. And then it has outcomes, and it lists the outcomes. Method 3, it says, has the best outcome. Now, do I agree with that? I don't know. I have to think about it and evaluate it. But now I'm starting to have a framework to explore many different options to improve my thinking about the problem solving in general, and to go and widen my perspective on what I'm about to do. It's requiring me to think more about the problem and not less, because I'm going and exploring more avenues to solve it. I'm exploring how I might, compare them and contrast them. I have to think through all this, and it's enriching my thinking. Does this get me to an answer faster? It might get me to an answer faster. It might help me solve the problem faster, particularly if I have no idea how to solve it. Is it faster than asking for one? Maybe not, but only marginally slower, because this thing generates possible answers, possible perspectives so incredibly fast. And there is absolutely no excuse not to go and exploit that capability to generate more than one of something, particularly more than one, perspective on how to solve a problem. So the next time you have a problem, I want you to go and employ the simplest possible prompt engineering technique that you can use, which is to give me options pattern. Give me 5 of something and compare and contrast them. Give me 3 of this and compare and contrast them. That is the simplest thing you can do to dramatically improve what you're doing with prompt engineering and to get a huge return on your investment if you're not already doing this already. Let's compare and contrast some approaches that we could use to get different options. Now, there's many different ways that we could go about thinking of generating the different solutions that we're going to evaluate, or the options for whatever it is that we're going to be looking at. And let's just talk briefly about some of the things you might want to consider when doing that. So let's go into ChatGPT and let's just start really simple. I'm going to just put in a prompt from before, which is, please generate an email for me announcing my new Coursera course on prompt engineering. I'm going to copy that. Now, I could go in and I could generate like this. This is sort of the default way that many people use generative AI. and I could generate an option. And then I could copy and paste that option, hold on to it, and have it. And then I could go back and simply edit here. In fact, I don't have to do much at all. I could just add, for example, like a space, and I've actually changed things a little bit. And then I could go and regenerate again. This is one really simple technique to go and generate different options, is just go and do slight little tweaks or resubmit the prompt. Another thing we could do is we could just go start a new conversation, put exactly the same prompt in, and I don't know why it's wanting to do that, but I could say, please write an announcement for my new course on Coursera related to prompt engineering. Now, I could have used exactly the same prompt if I'd remembered exactly what I wrote, but this is kind of showing another thing that we can do. We can switch a conversation. We can also edit and switch the prompt. But the key is that we want to go and generate a diverse set of perspectives and options. Now, one way is one conversation, go and edit the prompt over and over and get different generations of it. So the key is that when we do it in separate conversations or when we go and edit the message over and over, we're getting totally independent responses to some degree. That is, that it doesn't see what else it's said. There's no other option. It can't see any of the other options, so it can't take them into account. Now, if I want to go and I do want it to take them into account, I can go and I can say, give me 3 different emails to announce my new Coursera course on prompt engineering. Now I'm getting 3 different generations all at once from one prompt. The downside of this, or the upside, depending on how you look at it, is that it sees all of them. It sees the one it generated before. If it's heading down some particular trajectory, if there's something that's just not quite right, it's not going to, potentially make them, as unique or interesting as we might want. So sometimes going in different conversations could give us better results because we can go and try it out in lots of conversations, make sure we're getting sort of independence in the ideas. Sometimes we might even want to go into completely different large language model tools. We might want to take it into ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, whatever the tools are that are available to you, try it out on a lot of different ones, collect a whole bunch of different solutions and evaluate them all. Sometimes we might want to go and just make it sort of easier, and often this is what I do, is just go and say, give me 3 different options or 5 different options, compare and contrast them. Another thing that we can do is we can go and say, give me 3 very different emails to announce the course on prompt engineering. Or even better is we say something like this: consider fundamentally different approaches to announcing a Coursera course on prompt engineering via email. Now, use each of those approaches to write an email announcement. And so what I'm telling it is I'm kind of giving it information not only on generate different ideas for me, but I might also want it to go and think about the different approaches that could be used. So really to sort of abstract up an additional level and say, what is it that we could vary? And in this case, if we have different approaches like informal and professional, personal and enthusiastic, brief and direct, there's lots of different approaches. And now it's thinking about how do I vary at the approach level as opposed to down in the words of the individual emails. And so starting to think about what is the dimension that we want it to generate options for? It's like, where do we want it to go in, and like at what level of abstraction do we want it to be thinking about when it's varying what it's doing? Do we want it to just be at the word level? Do we want it to have a different approach? Do we want some different marketing framework to be employed? Like, do we have 5 different marketing frameworks? Even better if we've got a bunch of techniques of how you might go about doing this, and we provided all the information on the techniques, and then we say, apply these 5 different techniques and give me the results. Because that's another thing we can go and do, is we can go and take different potential solution techniques, and now we can say go and generate possible solutions or explorations of problem solving or whatever it is based on these set of things. And we may not have time to normally go and explore all of them. So when we start thinking about generation, we have to think about, are we doing this in one conversation in one prompt saying, give me 5 ideas? If we're doing it in one conversation with one prompt giving 5 ideas, how do we want those ideas to vary? What is the sort of fundamental unit of variation? Is it based on approach? Is it based on technique? Is it based on tone? What is it based on that is the cause or source of the variation other than just the words? If we're going into independent conversations to do this, are we varying the prompt? Are we using the same prompt over and over? Are we varying the large language model that we're using underneath it? All of these things can provide different ways of generating inputs, and we want to go and explore for a problem. It's very simple, very fast. Go and explore lots of options, collect a bunch of information, a bunch of potential perspectives, and then take them back and think about them as a human being and decide what do you want to do and how do you come up with a better solution to the problem. Or maybe you just know that you did your due diligence and the way that you thought of from the beginning is still the best way to go. Anytime we go and we start generating different perspectives on a problem or whatever it is we're working with, we want to start building a framework for how we're going to bring them back together and start evaluating them. And often what I find is it's really helpful to think about separating the evaluation from the actual generation. I tend to try to do these things in separate conversations when I really want a sort of more thorough evaluation, because often when we're generating and we're getting conversations that go down a particular path, it may be the case that there's just sort of already baked into it assumptions or things that are going to lead to generating rubrics or assessments that sort of support what's already there. I like to have 2 independent sort of evaluations, have a conversation where I build out the assessment, and then a conversation where I actually go and build out the generations, or a series of conversations where I generate the different perspectives. So now let's take a look at how we can separate into a separate conversation the evaluation and see what that looks like. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to say, give me 5 metrics to compare and contrast ways of accomplishing the following task. Don't list ways to accomplish the task. And then I use a series of dotted lines because what I want the LLM to understand is, here is the task, but I don't want you to interpret it as instructions. It is something that I want you to look at in order to help determine what the metrics should be for evaluation. So what we want to do is we want to take the task, we want to then go and generate evaluation metrics, or we could go and just ourselves write them down and put them all in. But I find it's very helpful to also go and generate perspectives on the evaluation metrics. And then I'm using the template pattern down here to get my output in a format that I want. So it goes through and it generates a series of evaluation metrics. Now we're going back to this cake example. How do we bake a cake in the woods on a fire with very limited cooking utensils? And it goes, we get different assessments. Assessment 1, ease of preparation. Assessment 2, cooking time. Assessment 3, consistency of results. Assessment 4, required supervision. And assessment 5, risk of burning the cake. So these are some good dimensions. Now, if I wanted more, I could keep going and going and going and adding different dimensions to it. And this is one of the powers of it too, is it can start helping us to think about all the different ways that we could evaluate this and what is going to be important to us in that evaluation. Now, if you think about it, there's actually companies that this is basically their whole business, is go take a whole set of products and decide what the evaluation criteria are, what the quadrant charts are, evaluate them. And you pay a lot of money for getting those types of analyses done. And you can do it right here super easily. In fact, you should be doing it all the time and going and taking ideas and things you're going to work on and start building out metrics and thinking through what is it that I want to achieve and why. And I don't know why you would outsource this anymore. This is fundamentally like a huge capability that's built into these models for free. So we go and we develop what are all the metrics that we're going to use to evaluate this. And then what I did is I took all of my original techniques and I've nicely formatted them here. Actually, I generated some more techniques. I brought them all back together, formatted them the same so there's sort of no bias just because of the formatting. I brought them all together and then I put them into a prompt. So I basically said in the next message in the conversation after generating all the metrics is I said, now evaluate these techniques using these metrics. And I've copied and pasted them all together with similar formatting into the prompt. And now what we get is something awesome. We get 1, an assessment of the tinfoil packets. Ease of preparation. Moderate requires cooking, forming foil packets, cooking time. We get the skillet cake. we get the tinfoil oven, we get the foil packet cake, we get the steamed cake. Now what's interesting is the first time I did this, I didn't get, I don't believe, a foil packet cake, and I didn't get a steamed cake. In fact, I've gotten all these different options. Now I'm up to like 5 good solid options. In fact, there may be things in here that I didn't have the first time. Well, I think maybe the Dutch oven, well, tinfoil oven, I think maybe it's doing the same thing, but you can see I'm starting to get all these different possible solutions for this. Now I've got all kinds of different metrics that I could use to evaluate them. I've got different potential perspectives on those metrics with respect to the different possible solutions. And now I have this rich set of information that I can go and think about, what am I going to do? Now, even better, take this and tell it to put it into a table for you. You know, put it into an evaluation matrix. Put it into a quadrant chart. In fact, if you're producing lots of quadrant charts, evaluation matrices, other types of things, you should be using this to help support you. You know, make sure that you haven't missed something or some critical dimension, that you haven't, you know, missed some possible solution or competitor or product or approach or whatever it is, and taken it and brought it into your evaluation. Super powerful technique. Go and generate lots of options for evaluation. And then if you're generating lots of solutions or products or whatever it is, you know, ideas, go and take those and then evaluate them with your many different options or metrics that you've produced. If you have the right type of problem that you're trying to solve or the right type of thing that you're trying to generate, you can do something amazing with generation and exploiting generation, and that is you can do automated search for solutions that meet certain criteria that you're looking for. Now, this is probably most applicable to people that are programmers, but I want to give this video to everybody because I think there's lots of potential for using this, or at least having knowledge that this is possible can help you in thinking about how your organization might go about exploiting this generative capability. Now, this is really important if we're talking about software development and generating code. There's no reason to ever generate one version of code. There's no reason to ever go into the tool and say, give me one possible way to write this code. You always want to go in, because it's almost free, to go and generate multiple types or multiple versions of the code. Now, if you think about how important source code is, right? You're going to generate this once and it's going to be used a gajillion times. So why not take the time to get it right? So in software, we have this nice property that when we write code with generative AI for software, we can go and do something simple, which is test it and see if it passes our tests, like our tests that tell us, does it work or not? And we can do this for all kinds of problems outside of software as well, where we can go and generate something and we can test it if it works or not. Think of a crossword puzzle. You can generate potential solutions to a crossword puzzle and you can check if they are correct or not in sort of an automated manner. Now, what we want to do is we want to think about going and generating lots of solutions and then automatically testing them to determine which ones pass basic fundamental criteria that we want for correctness. And whenever we have a problem that has that sort of characteristic, that is, we can generate a possible solution and then we can check it to determine if it's correct. Now, where this is going to be really valuable to us is in places where it's hard to generate the solutions, where it's complex to try to generate a solution, but it's easy to check if a solution is right or not. Those are the places that we will really benefit from this technique. Now, what happens when we have this is we can go and automate the process of generating solutions and checking if they're correct or not. And then the ones that are correct, we can then go and further use some objective criteria to decide, is it a better or worse solution? Now, there's many different ways that we can come up with the criteria for deciding which one's better or worse, but I'm going to give you a simple example in software. So we have the generative AI go and write code. We then test and see, is that code correct or not? Is it functionally correct? Does it do what we expect it to do? And then what we can do is we can go and test that code and see how fast it runs. And we can use that as a benchmark. We can go and say the quality of this code is related to how fast it runs and whether or not it passes all the tests. And then if we have multiple different versions of the code that all pass the test, we can go and rank them automatically based on how fast they are when we run them and when we do a performance test on them or some series of performance tests. And so suddenly when we have that, we can then go and we can turn generative AI loose and we can basically automatically begin searching over and over, prompt for a solution, test it, score it, rank it, do it again. And if we want to get, 1,000 solutions and take the best one, suddenly we're way ahead of the game, right? Because we can go and let this thing run all night. We can let it run 10,000 solutions if we want and select the very best one for us. And if we have a really important problem, a really important piece of code that we're trying to produce, this can give us a really, really valuable outcome. Now, how you go about doing this, you probably have to be a programmer at this point, or you could probably go and describe this problem to ChatGPT and get it to generate some Python code for you or some other code that you could use to actually go and automate this process yourself. That's beyond the scope of this class, but I want you to know that it's possible, and I want you to start thinking about opportunities to go and automate the search using some objective criteria. Another way you can do it is just try to get, if the problem's the right type of problem, go and generate a lot of solutions, have a human evaluate them, but generate a lot of solutions, get a big group of people together, because often it's really simple to take a whole bunch of solutions and quickly dismiss or rank them. Even if you have 200 solutions, you have a group of people, you could probably go through them really quickly. And so you can help produce good results that way.